Hi there, and thanks for listening. My name is Daniel Kringer, and this is the SkanFest podcast, an interview series for the Skaneateles Festival, a summer concert series based in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York. In these talks, we are spending time getting to know our visiting artists who travel the world making music at the very top of their field. Praised for his versatility, technical clarity, and keen musical insight, Tito Muñoz is internationally recognized as one of the most gifted conductors on the podium today. Having spent 10 years as music director of the Phoenix Symphony, his tenure with the organization ended with the 23-24 season, though he continues a relationship as a newly appointed artistic partner while traveling as a guest conductor. Other appointments include music director at the National Opéra of Lorraine and the Symphonic Orchestra of Nancy, both in France, and assistant conducting for orchestras in Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Aspen in the USA. Tito is with the festival for a concert with Orchestre on August 10th at Anyela's Vineyards in Skaneateles, New York. Thanks for coming by, Maestro.
My pleasure. It's great to be here.
Thank you. So I lightly brushed on some of your appointments and experiences, and I hope we'll be able to expand. However, I'd like to start with some introductory questions. Namely, first, can you tell me a little bit about your background and how you were introduced to music?
Sure, yeah. So I'm from New York City. I was born and raised in Queens, and my first intro in music was in middle school, just a middle school public school string program that happened to be an elective in my middle school, and so I started on the violin. And actually I have a cousin who is older than me who played violin, and so I think that was sort of my impetus. He was doing it, so I might as well. And he went to the same middle school that I went to. Sure. So I started on violin, and I guess I just took to it pretty quickly. My teacher there, my string orchestra teacher, who I'm still in touch with and still close with. He saw that I had some aptitude in it, more so than usual. And so he recommended me to a program at the Juilliard School, which is called, and it still exists today, it's called the Music Advancement Program, which is, for lack of a better word, it's an affirmative action program for Black, Latino, and Native American students. It's been expanded since then, but in its pilot program, in its pilot years, it was that. And it was a wonderful program that I was able to go to Juilliard on Saturdays and learn a lot. And that was kind of the beginning of my sort of immersion in classical music. I think just growing up in New York City provided a lot of access that I probably may not have gotten other places. So I feel very lucky that I had that in the very beginning, because it's not something that I, realized until much later.
Right, it's a great opportunity. Yeah. So you started out on violin?
Yes.
And how did you come toward conducting then?
Right. So conducting, it's interesting because I think every conductor has their own path to that kind of leadership role, like pretty much any kind of leadership role. I mean, any kind of CEO or manager of a McDonald's or whatever, whatever kind of leadership role. I think everybody has different paths to go in it. And for me, I know that I was a little bit type A when I played in orchestra. And so I would be in orchestra. And, I remember the very first time that I played in a youth orchestra was in my high school. I went to LaGuardia High School in New York City, which is the quote unquote performing arts, the famed school. And that was the first time I was in like a real like symphonic orchestra that was playing real, not arranged for a school, And I remember watching the conductor, and he was rehearsing things that I didn't pick up on. Like my ears were not quite, mature enough yet to understand everything that he was doing. And so I remember thinking to myself those first few rehearsals, like, what does he know that I don't know? How is he hearing all these things that I wasn't hearing before, wasn't noticing or picking up on? So I started really honing in on what he was doing. And that actually led me to then start having my own opinions about what was going on. And so sitting in the back of the violin section, I started thinking to myself, oh, we should be doing this kind of bowing or this kind of phrasing. And of course, being a backseat conductor is not okay. So
not always appreciated.
Yeah, not always appreciated. So that actually gave me motivation to get better on the violin, so I could move up and be a section leader, for example, and be able to give the section direction. And then I think I had that inkling to conduct because I just was fascinated by the whole thing. And thankfully, I had a lot of really wonderful mentors, even during high school, that gave me opportunities to give it a try. And so that was really something that I was very grateful for. I did a summer camp. I worked at a summer camp as a counselor, a performing arts summer camp in upstate New York, Hancock, New York, actually.
Oh, lovely.
French Woods, it's what it's called. And they do a lot of musicals. And so my first real conducting experience was doing musicals, doing Broadway shows.
Must have been fun.
And it was it was so much fun. And I was a high school student, actually. So it was really like trial by fire. You just thrown in.
We're just going to do it.
We're just going to do it. And I'm going to figure it out. And doing pit orchestra work actually is a great way to learn because you have to keep it together. Like there's no, sometimes people can't hear each other. Totally. People can't see each other. And it's really all about you trying to make it work. So that was the beginning. And then I just, from that, I started growing and applying to programs and eventually making my way into the professional world.
Fantastic. So are there conductors or maybe more generally musicians that inspire you? Yeah.
Well, the one conductor that I can comfortably call a teacher, because I didn't get a degree in it. My undergraduate degree program was on violin, but I definitely had a mentor at the Aspen Music Festival that was really who I could call my conducting teacher, and that was David Zinman. In fact, he was music director of the Rochester Philharmonic previously.
And he's conducted here as well.
That's right, and so he's a very a big guru for me. I mean, he was my mentor, and I owe so much to him. So he was a wonderful mentor to me. And my two bosses, when I was assistant conductor in Cleveland and in Cincinnati. In Cincinnati, that was Paavo Järvi, who at the time was music director there, and he had several orchestras in Europe. Now he's with the Tonhalle Orchestra in Zurich, which, interestingly enough, used to be David Zinman's orchestra also. And then the other one was Franz Welsermost in Cleveland. He was my boss in Cleveland. So, and both of those were really wonderful mentors that I learned a lot from. And so, and from that, I've also met so many others that have all influenced me in so many ways.
Yeah. So are there, kind of bridging off of that, are there particular pieces of music that speak to you that you enjoy conducting?
That's a good question. And I get that question a lot, like either favorite piece or what kind of music speaks to me. But it's interesting because as a conductor, I do have pieces of music that I like to listen to perhaps. And there are, I think, certain pieces of music that I haven't done yet that I would like to do.
Sure.
But, as a conductor, the process is kind of what is fascinating and what kind of drives me to do it. It's taking a group of people from point A to point B. And sometimes it could be a piece that I didn't think was all that great to begin with, but the process might be very joyful. It might be very fun or exciting if the chemistry with the group is really great. Yeah. And vice versa. It could be a piece that I love so much, but the chemistry with the group is not good. And that could be a miserable week actually, because you things you want to do, or like you want, and just it's not happening for whatever reason, and so that could be really, really bad week. So I will always say that my favorite piece is the piece that I'm conducting at the time.
That's a fair answer,
but it definitely, the process of like actually taking an orchestra through a piece is what excites me.
Well, we'll circle back to the collaborative stuff. I have more questions about that, but just another sort of couple of incidental questions, which can be fun. So first, what do you spend time listening to? Maybe even beyond score study and whatnot. Is there anything that you enjoy?
Usually if I'm like on a drive or something like that, it's like top 40. I just put on whatever. There's so many wonderful artists, and I like to get away from classical music every once in a while. And I have a lot of friends who are in all sorts of genres of music, so I usually am listening to their stuff or things that they recommend to me, just because I do enough classical music as a whatever, and so so usually on a drive I'm not listening to any classical music whatsoever.
Interesting. And what do you like to read? Or anything you're reading now?
It's interesting. I'm not much of a reader, actually. However, I did start reading a book called James. James, a novel. It just came out. It's a really interesting retelling of Huckleberry Finn. From the point of view of Jim, the enslaved character.
Yeah, I was wondering that. Yeah.
It is phenomenal. It's such a great book. Yeah, James, a novel is what it's called, and it's fascinating, really, to see the whole story from Jim's perspective. That's very, very cool.
Yeah, how'd you find it?
It's a bestseller right now. So it's one of those things, and it was recommended to me by a friend,
great.
and so great book.
Right, great. So getting a little deeper with music, what I think you hinted a little bit talking about process, working with other people. Is there anything else you might want to talk about as far as what makes music meaningful to you? Why do you do it?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
And it's something that I even talk about when I'm working with groups, because sometimes as musicians, especially classical musicians, because classical musicians, we're the only one of the few genres of music, and maybe the only genre of music where you actually get a degree in, and you actually study like classroom study, and you actually take history and theory and all these things. I mean, it's really maybe the only genre that you do that with. Yeah. And so sometimes we get in our own kind of bubble or our own heads about the execution of it. We forget that it's like any music. It's just thoughts. It's somebody's actual, like, we're recreating Beethoven's thoughts, that he actually had in his mind, and he wrote down on paper to give us a blueprint to what it should be. But that it is a blueprint. There is an actual sort of soul in it, and a life in it, and a thought process in it. And so sometimes I have to remind orchestras, like, guys, he was thinking these things. And so we need to stop worrying about whether it needs to be short or long or this. It's like, whatever. It just needs to sound right. It needs to sound like if you thought of this, what would it sound like, And for me, that's what's fascinating, is I open up a score, whether it's a Mozart or a Beethoven or a new piece that was just written. But, the composer had this imagination and had these thoughts in his head, and we have to recreate that. And that, for me, is like the most fascinating thing about it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Great. So pivoting a little bit now. So you've spent time as a music director for opera and symphony in France. I'm curious to know how that opportunity came about, and anything you took away from the experience.
Yeah. So interesting that institution, the Opéra National de Lorraine, the orchestra is the same. So it's the two. It's the same
between the two cities.
No, it's the same actually. So Nancy is a town in Lorraine.
Oh, I see.
And that orchestra is the orchestra for the opera.
Oh, okay.
And so it's actually the same organization. They used to have different names. Now they have the same name. So the name that it used to be, the Orchestre Symphonique et Lyrique de Nancy, is not anymore. Now it's just the Orchestre de l'Opéra National de Lorraine.
Lorraine is the region.
Lorraine is the region.
Okay,
exactly.
gotcha.
So the quiche Lorraine comes from the Lorraine region of France. Yes, that's right. And they have great quiche there. It's really amazing. But yeah, and so Nancy has this opera house. And gosh, if you had asked me even the year before I was appointed there as music director that my first music director job would be in France, I would have thought you were crazy.
Sure.
But this is how the classical music world works sometimes. And I went there as a guest conductor. I was recommended to them by a friend of mine who had worked there before. And so I went as a guest conductor, and it was kind of like this wonderful marriage. I met the orchestra, I met the team. It was really a wonderful collaboration the first couple times that I went as a guest conductor. And then they were looking for a music director. And so they asked me to be, and I said, sure. I didn't speak French at the time to learn, but it was a really wonderful opportunity. I mean, it was only 2 years. I kind of was a little homesick, and I wanted to work in America. But I definitely cherish that time, because it was the first time that I was the boss, and that's a big deal to really take that on, and it changes your perspective on how to run rehearsals, how to run an organization. Certainly make mistakes and learn from them, and so it was a really great opportunity, and I was able to do a lot of really great music.
Yeah. So speaking of being the boss, I wonder if you might talk a little bit about the Phoenix Symphony, which is another big marker in your career. What are you proud of from your time there, or you want to talk about some things you did?
Sure. Yeah, it was a long time. I was there for 10 years, and it was my first American music director job, which is very different in a lot of ways than working almost anywhere else, because in America, even the financial structure of orchestras is very different than in Europe. Because in Europe and in almost everywhere else, it's state funded, it's government funded, whereas here it's indirectly government funded by tax breaks. So people donate, but people have to donate. Yeah. And so therefore fundraising is a big part of everything that we do. It kind of permeates all over, and so that can be a challenge in a lot of ways because you don't have as much freedom sometimes to be able to do the things that you might want to do, because you do have to sometimes appease, sometimes you want to make sure that you're getting butts in the seats and that sort of thing. So it can be constraining in certain ways, but in other ways you create relationships with people, and the sky's the limit. You're not limited in any way as long as you can kind of build those relationships with people. I think for me in Phoenix, one of the biggest things that I'm proud of is I was able to start a new music festival there, a 1 week thing that we did called Reverb, and it actually started right after COVID. We did a week-long celebration of new music, and I would invite a curator, somebody kind of in the field of new music, new classical music, and they would come and share kind of their inspirations and their music, sometimes if they're composers themselves. And the orchestra would have these 2 wonderful programs, and we'd collaborate with other institutions in the city. And so that was a really, really nice thing to start. And I'm hoping that now that I'm not there, that they will continue that for the future. And then, of course, just building an orchestra. I mean, you do it with the repertoire that you choose, kind of knowing what the orchestra needs to work on. Maybe they haven't done a certain kind of music, or maybe they need more of a dose of like early classical, because that builds sort of the building blocks of ensemble and listening, and then hiring new people, because there's always people that are retiring for whatever reason, or leaving the orchestra, and then you hire new people. So I think by the time I left, 40% of the orchestra will be new.
Wow.
Which is a big thing, because people usually are in those jobs for most of their lives. Sure. And so to have that kind of fresh perspective in the group is really, really nice, and to then mold that and build that is really great.
Yeah, great. And so now you're doing a lot of guest conducting, a lot of traveling, visiting different states, different countries. And I'm curious to know, what are your thoughts on the lifestyle? And do you have any specific or like notable memories from the road? Oh,
gosh. Yeah. I mean, I've been doing it for a long time. Because even as music director somewhere, you're still spending most of the year guest conducting. And so I think maybe the most fascinating thing is how no matter where I am, and even if I can't speak the language in the country, the moment I give a breath and start a piece, the communication is the same everywhere. Yeah. And so I could lead an orchestra anywhere, and it would be fine, and we would be able to do it. And I remember the first time I was in China, and the orchestra in that particular town that I was in Xiamen, most of the orchestra didn't speak any English. And so they understood numbers, they understood the Italian phrases that are in the music. And that was basically all I had. I had just that, and I would have to just like sing things that I wanted, or say in Italian, certain things that they could understand, like corto for short, or anything like that. Yeah. And but ultimately we were able to do it. We were able to kind of make it work, and that's really interesting to me. So that's the fascinating thing about kind of the similarities. The differences, of course, like I mentioned, are the financial structure, which does actually affect the whole sort of mindset around orchestra. Here in America, we also, the training for orchestra, specifically for playing in an orchestra, is a little bit more robust than most other places in the world. Like we almost treat orchestra like a vocation, whereas in most other places, orchestra is just an outlet. And when you go to school, there's not necessarily an emphasis on like taking auditions. You're just learning music. You're learning how to express yourself. You're learning how to interpret the piece. But there isn't this kind of like idea that well, we're going to have a orchestral excerpt class, which is what we do here very normally. That everybody does that. Whereas it's just not as prevalent in Europe and other parts of the world. Yeah, interesting. Yeah. So I'm curious to know how you go about preparing to work with a new ensemble, like you were just talking about, like a new score. What's your approach as far as breaking things down? Yeah, well, a new score, I mean, depends on the piece, but a new score certainly is just like anything. You kind of, the way I do it is I sort of go big to small. I think of, larger structures and sort of as if I'm looking at like a blueprint or an outline. I kind of break a score down that way, and then go into details basically. And sort of so once I figure out an outline for the piece, to know how it's structured, to know where all the major moments are, then I can kind of dive into into details and understand the structure even further. I think most pieces I do that. And depending on the difficulty and the length of piece will depend on how long I spend on it.
Yeah.
And then working with a new orchestra, that's always an interesting thing because most of the time as a guest conductor, unless it's an orchestra that I work with regularly, it's pretty much always a new experience. I'm always working with new orchestras all the time, and vice versa. The musicians are always working with new conductors all the time. I mean, so it's sort of learning how to be principal for a day. Essentially, because essentially that's what it is.
Yeah.
So you kind of learn just personalities. You learn how to read the room quickly as a conductor because you only have. I mean, for example, in this case with the Skaneateles Orchestra here, we have 2 rehearsals for the concert, and so it's a pretty quick. You just have to assess right away and just go for it. And so that's maybe the most exhilarating part of it.
Be exciting. So, speaking of the Skaneateles Festival Orchestra, you're with the festival for a concert on Saturday the 10th, and I'm just wondering if you could spend some time talking about the program and your thoughts on it.
Sure. It's a wonderful program. The second half of the program is the Beethoven Pastoral Symphony, which is about as apropos to the setting as you could possibly get. Yeah. Nature and birds and storm, which actually is a wonderful storm movement, which actually sounds like what sort of earlier today sounds like. So it's a great piece. I mean, that's a piece that I love very much. The musicians love to play, and that I think will be a perfect way to just showcase the venue, being outdoors and hearing all the things. So I'm looking forward to that. Those people who don't know the Pastoral Symphony of Beethoven, he wrote this piece. In a lot of ways, it might be the first programmatic piece of music. We call pieces programmatic when the composer has a specific narrative that they're trying to convey, as opposed to just absolute music, which is I'm just writing a piece to write a piece. There's no specific thing about it. But in this case, Beethoven actually has titles for each movement that describe the scene that he's trying to, or the picture that he's trying to paint. And this might be one of the first times that a composer has done that. And so there are 5 movements, and each movement has a specific idea. And it's wonderful, and you can hear all of it. And if you saw the original Fantasia, it's in Disney's Fantasia as one of the pieces that they use. On the first half, however, we have one composer from Afghanistan and one composer from Syria. Arsan Fahim is somebody that the Skaneateles Festival has commissioned, a young 20-something-ish composer who is from Afghanistan. And he was just actually talking to the orchestra today, describing his music, because we're playing 3 things of his. We're playing one piece called Forbidden Dances, which was written previously. One new piece, Memories of a Place that I haven't been, or that I've never seen, something like that, is the piece that he wrote for us. Yep. And then there's a Afghan folk song that he arranged, and that's the 3rd piece. And he described his own experience that he moved to America to study music just before the Taliban took over in Afghanistan. And so Memories, the Memories piece is his kind of idea of what it would be like to go back to an Afghanistan that he doesn't know, because right now music is banned in Afghanistan. The Taliban has completely banned it, and so they kill people who play music. They kill people who have instruments. They're not allowed to have it. And the one music school that existed, which is where Arsen went to school for music, is now a military base. They've converted it. And so it's pretty wild. And so he doesn't know in Afghanistan where music is not allowed. He doesn't understand that. And so to write a piece that reflects that feeling and that almost weird nostalgia of a place that he doesn't know is really, really interesting. Forbidden Dances is similarly, it's sort of this idea that, because there's no music, there's no dance either. And so that's what sort of the Forbidden Dances talks about. And then the folk tune, just because he wants something that's a little bit more concrete from home, something that's familiar to people of Afghanistan. It's very powerful, and the music is really beautiful. He writes really, really beautiful music that is, very pleasing to listen to, but also just really kind of evocative and very soulful. Similarly, Kenan Asme, who's the clarinet soloist and composer of Suite for Improviser and Orchestra, and it's a piece that he wrote basically for himself. He originally had a small band that had typical Syrian instruments, Middle Eastern instruments, and he wrote this piece that eventually became a piece for orchestra accompaniment and him. And so you have the orchestra, you have him, that he improvises quite a bit throughout this piece. There are many places where it's cool. It's really cool. There are many places where, it even opens with him improvising, but there are many places where the orchestra is playing vamps while he is just playing over, and then he'll play a certain figure that eventually, once we get out of the vamp, the orchestra starts to play, and vice versa. We'll play something, and then eventually he'll take it over in his improvisation. There's also a wonderful percussion feature, and we have one of our percussionists playing that with him. And so it's a really, really cool piece in 3 movements that also, harken back to his idea of home. And that was, I think that was the purpose of both of these composers, was to think about, what is a concept of home that is universal, but at the same time we're learning something from both of these composers.
Fantastic. Well, that'll be great. So finally, just to wrap things up, I'm just curious to know if you have any upcoming engagements or projects you want to discuss.
Sure. Well, in fact, I'm actually working with Kenan with his Suite for Improviser and Orchestra later on this year with the Orchestra St. Luke's, and we're doing that in educational concerts, actually, in the Bronx in New York City. So that'll be fun. I actually did a video during COVID with Kenan of this piece as well. We did with the Orchestra of St. Luke's as well. So I have a background with. I know this piece quite well, and I've done it with Kenan now, and it'll be nice to revisit the piece again. This will be the 3rd time I'm doing it, and so that's in December. And I'm actually locally. I'm actually going to be at the Eastman School of Music several times this season. We're still working out the details of that, but I'll have 2 weeks this coming season with the Eastman School Orchestras. So I'm looking forward to being back in the area for that.
Fantastic. Well, Maestro Tito Muñoz is with us for Beethoven Under the Stars, a concert with orchestra on August 10th at Anyela's Vineyards. To learn more about the festival and to buy tickets, please visit www.skanfest.org. Thanks, Tito, and we will catch you guys on the next one.
Thanks.